My name is Jacob Jonas, and I'm the creative director of Jacob Jonas The Company. We're a Los Angeles-based dance company, and hi, Ada.
Jacob, it's a pleasure to have you for Oda. Um, let's start off with the most obvious question about the project. Film.Dance project is a global endeavor comprising of 150 artists from 52 cities across 25 countries. What served as an inspiration for creating something of such magnitude and scale?
I think for us, we've always been motivated by this sense of global creativity and connection, community. And so we wanted to find a project that would really, especially during the pandemic when all theaters were closed and dance companies stopped working, really bring artists together and try to make the art form of dance and the medium of dance visible during this time. So that was the real motivation.
And now, with the world gradually opening up, how has the idea of being able to do live performance again affected you?
Well, the idea of it still feels very unpredictable. I think dancers never danced to make a lot of money. They did it because they really loved the idea of doing it. And so I feel like there's this itch from not just dancers, but all live performers to really be able to be on stage again. And there's still so much unpredictability about when we'll be able to do that and how soon. And so I think we're all still ready. I think we're all sitting on that need to be back in a creative process. But I think the most important thing that we need to keep thinking about is people's health and safety. So hopefully theaters will open up again and audiences will feel safe to join and experience live dance.
What is the situation like in Los Angeles at the moment in terms of opening, and what are you experiencing at the moment in California overall?
Yeah, I think just in our whole country at the moment, our administration, the current administration, has been very effective in getting people vaccinated. So I think the goal is that the majority of people do get vaccinated. So the likelihood that they can get this virus becomes less. But specifically in LA, it seems like, well, I think federally there's a lot of similarities where theaters are starting to think about opening it, but 20%, which just economically wouldn't be productive. But it seems like we're in this for another, I would say, 6 to 12 months, unless our own organization, can start self-producing shows that are outdoors that are a little bit more accessible to live audiences in non-traditional spaces.
Would you consider, if there will be more opportunities to doing things open door and outdoors, would you consider doing it also across America, not just LA, and perhaps then later on globally?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think we're definitely interested in doing live performances nationally and internationally. I think right now we're just trying to figure out from a financial standpoint, where is that funding going to come from? Because if it's not coming directly from ticket sales, then we need to find other streams of revenue to be able to pay our artists and to make the work be presented at a high caliber. But I think we are and have been thinking about what this new stage might look like. But a lot of our focuses have been digital as well, which is why we've been doing this series. So I think it's a combination between both.
Now, with Jacob Jonas The Company, you've done global projects in the past, such as the hashtag Cameras and Dancers initiative, which paired up photography influences with dancers against architectural backdrops. What was different about the Film.Dance project compared to Cameras and Dancers?
Yeah, I think Cameras and Dancers was super interesting because through the medium of photography, you could capture one isolated moment as a still image, whereas with Films.Dance, it's all through the medium of film. And so rather than just having one isolated image, you're creating sequences of movement and having that movement be documented and isolated through multiple perspectives, and also having the ability sonically to have collaborators through music. With films or cameras and dancers, the same formula was pretty much there, where we were encouraging dance to be visible. We were intersecting it with other mediums such as architecture and photography, and we were activating spaces. But in this capacity, it's just a little bit more spread out. And but yeah, I think the difference is that it's through the medium of film rather than photography.
Ultimately, it's all about storytelling, right? Um, what makes storytelling such an important aspect of your work? And would you consider yourself the storyteller, the conduit for storytelling, or both?
I think storytelling just throughout any artistic medium is super important because then it gives the audiences the ability to understand and resonate with the work. I think artists hold this very important responsibility in life, whereas in other professions, you pursue those professions to help other people, or for example, in medicine or in law to protect people legally. But in the arts, you really are responsible for taking your life experiences and then interpreting them through your medium to inspire audiences. So I think storytelling is such a vibrant part of it, and not just for me as the author of making the dance or the film, but also for the dancer, the subject, or the musician um, to communicate their narrative and story too. So it's multiple perspectives and backgrounds coming together to equally tell their story, essentially, and it's super important, I think, to this understanding of life as life evolves through digital media, through isolation, through times like this where a lot of people are isolated. It gives people that sense of connectivity that's oftentimes rare, especially in today's times.
Yes, you've mentioned that the connectivity aspect. Now, over the past year, we have all stayed connected while being physically apart. How have your personal routines changed as a dancer and a choreographer? And what have you paid more attention to?
Yeah, I think the biggest routine is that I often work within my creative process with other people. So my vision is facilitated by other people like doing it. And so I've had to shift gears where I'm not physically interacting as much with other people. And now my practice is more of a self practice in terms of making dance and just feeling my body and kind of going through those therapeutic processes. So that pretty much in terms of routine has shifted, but I think mostly everything else has stayed consistent. How much I work, where I work, what our goals are, and how our team internally has been delegating tasks and achieving them.
What would you say, when you mentioned your body, what would you say you feel your body on a deeper level? And are you more in sync with it? And how has this shown itself to you?
I feel like I'm never really in sync with my body, which is why I think dance works so well. I think I'm always trying to, just as a tool, I think a lot of people seek therapy in different ways. Um, some people seek therapy through writing or through communication. I've always seeked it through movement, and my life is constantly evolving and shifting in terms of where I'm at, what my focuses are. If I'm having more of a low time or a high time, I always go to movement as that means of therapy. So it's really just an inner dialogue with myself. And I think professionally, I've been able, through that research of trying to understand myself more deeply, I've been able to then communicate uh, that research to other people to make work.
Now, when we talk about movement, let's also talk about your personal background. You've mentioned in the past that you started dancing quite late through your experience with the street performance group Calypso Tumblers in Venice, LA. What captivated you about the group and what pushed you into dance initially?
I think it was less about dance itself and more about the familial aspect of what the Calypso Tumblers represented. I grew up uh, in a home with divorced parents, so there's a lot of back and forth between my parents, and um, I was always craving that sense of home outside of my family life. And so when I came across this group, I just saw how happy they were, and I saw how they were inspiring audiences that would just come across their day walking on the boardwalk for tourism activities and just other outputs, and would just come across these artists and just would be super inspired and excited. And there was something really energizing about that. And I think I wanted that sense of almost like male mentorship, especially at the time I was like 13. And so I was just seeking that feeling of wanting to learn what independence was. And yeah, so it was a brotherhood of artists and mentors that really started guiding me on a really interesting path and teaching me a lot about work ethic and curiosity and being inquisitive and just learning a lot about my physical roots, which really informed the rest of my life. So I think that's more what it was about, and less the desire to necessarily be a dancer. I think dance was just the way in which I explored those things.
You mentioned obviously mentorship. I think it was 2012 when you had just won the Raw competition, and you had subsequently a chance to work with a amazing legendary choreographer Donald Byrd. How did his relationship affect you, and what did you take away with it?
Well, it's I think with all the mentors I've had through dance, especially him, there's this, when you're younger, you crave the accomplishment, you crave um, the knowing of how to do things. And I think something that he really helped me with was this idea of patience and like not forcing maturity. I think I wanted to force my maturity to seek out certain success or certain opportunities. And so he really helped that. He also gave me a lot of infrastructure on choreographic composition, giving me tools of how many different ways you can approach composition through choreography. And then lastly, he really exposed me to the infrastructure from a business model of how dance operates in the States through a nonprofit umbrella, and how you just like really building up that infrastructure. And then lastly, as you mentioned, he's a very significant artist. And so I think just subconsciously through that association, it gave me a lot of confidence to like really push through and believe in myself. I think mentorship above all is guidance and support. I think artists specifically need so much support because it's hard to seek it out from society. Society doesn't necessarily accept the role of an artist so deeply, and so we seek that support out so much. And so to have it from people at his level and rigor is super helpful and important, and still admire and respect him deeply to this day. So
You've obviously mentioned choreography, and that has been quite an important part of who you are. You, for Film.Dance, you choreographed Edging Normal and co-directed Kaduna, as well as Weakness of the Flesh for the project. Where does your versatility come from? How is it mirrored in your everyday life?
I think it has always been birthed by this idea of always being inquisitive. I think when I started dancing, a lot of the friends that I had were saying like, I'm a ballet dancer, I'm a break dancer. And they kind of put themselves into this, into this isolated style or genre of movement. And so in this capacity, I always wanted to not like singularly focus on one thing. I wanted to try to be as versatile as possible through my movement practices, through the mediums in which I express dance and art. And so a lot of that is spawned just through, the desire to just learn as much as possible.
With the curiosity for learning and curiosity for, understanding different things, what has been the most interesting aspect of your curiosity, and what has been the most surprising part it has led to so far, and why?
I think what it's led to is like meeting people. And I think so often we're so focused on the result or the product of the work. But for me, as you mentioned, like working with so many artists over the years, making the work has been exciting, but I think most of all cultivating the relationships and then maintaining those relationships over time, because as you grow, as you learn, they do too, and vice versa. And you need advice, oftentimes you can lean on that community of people to gain that advice. And I think also just in dance, it can be such an insular medium, as really as any artistic endeavor. And so the more people that you have, going back to that idea of support, I think, yeah, the curiosity really just comes through meeting people and having like really thoughtful conversations.
What was your fondest experience about participating in the Film Dance project? Because ultimately it was about people and being together with people.
I think the best experience, just, you know, having the idea from scratch and then actually seeing it come to life. There's two things that really, just when you ask that I respond to. The first is knowing that if I didn't really initiate this project, these 15 films would have never been made. And so it really holds such a responsibility to people that want to start ideas, because not everybody has the ambition or the drive or the goals to do that. And so to have made these 15 films and know that they are inspiring people, feels like a really strong responsibility. And so just to know that they wouldn't exist had we not done that feels really exciting. And the second is like this idea of culture. You know, we worked with artists in Brazil, in Nigeria, in China, in Amsterdam, in Barcelona, all over the world. And that's just where we filmed them. And we also worked with other like musicians and fashion designers and people in other countries too. And so to learn so much more deeply about culture through and history of culture and what the arts mean in those cities, and how to, for me, like one of the things I would talk about sonically is how do we make the voices of these languages heard in the films? Or when I was talking to the directors about finding locations, how do we make it feel like as a viewer we're in the backyard of some of these venues or these locations? And so kind of exposing culture to different people. I think for any of us, if we've traveled, most people that have, it's rarely the being in those spaces, but more about going to the museums and experiencing the architecture in those spaces, or going to the person you met on the street and going to their house for a local meal, and just understanding kind of the food. And like the arts really amplify a city. And so, yeah, I think that's been really cool to learn a lot more about artists in their backyards.
About culture, you know, on your travels and on your filmings, especially with regards to Film Dance project, what have been the most surprising things you have found out perhaps about yourself?
Maybe that I've always been motivated to like always work. I don't like not working. And so that's something I've like learned a lot about myself. And also this idea that people want to work with you and they just need to be asked. And so I think a lot of people occupy what I call like real estate, like emotional real estate in your head. And people procrastinate a lot, or they kind of hold things off because they're waiting for this answer. And I think what's been really nice is to make these answers happen quickly by just reaching out to people. Like there's been artists on this list that I've been wanting to work with for 5 years, and I just never did it. And I always think about them. So to just go out and just kind of put yourself out there it's taught me a lot about myself, because it shows that people have the desire to work together. And in asking people and kind of doing that outreach and research to express interest in someone else's work, it really gives you a sense of self-worth and confidence that I feel like can be missing a lot of times. And yeah, it's a really good question.
I think ultimately we spend so much time in isolation and we end up doubting so much ourselves. We end up doubting whether somebody would like to work with me. You always end up being the biggest critic of yourself at the same time. Would you consider that has been also one of the biggest reasons why that has come to fore, being the biggest critic?
Absolutely. And I think specifically in the medium of dance, you know, like dancers don't get paid a lot of money. And there's been a lot of research done about that more recently, about the amount of unemployment and the average salary for a dancer compared to other mediums of art. I think that sense of constantly needing self-worth and self-value, because dancers don't receive it in a monetary form, so they need to seek it out in other ways. And a lot of that is being super hard on yourself and comparing yourself to other dancers or movement artists. And I think what I've learned most specifically in the past year is like kind of how unproductive and inefficient that is, to be spending so much time about the work as opposed to the opportunity. And I think a lot of people want to work with dance. A lot of people want to go experience it and see it. And clearly this project is a testament to that, knowing how much engagement we've had and kind of the response we've received. But uh, it goes back to what we were talking about with this idea of support earlier on, where support is a very vital thing in people's lives. Going, like, thinking about isolation, thinking about pursuing anything, something, people need support. And I think artistic communities can sometimes be competitive with one another, talking poorly about each other's work. And I think what we all need to do is just like fucking go for it and just be like, yo, your work is dope. Or like, maybe it wasn't dope, but like really great effort, and keep going for it. And I think we just need to show more love, which might sound corny, but I think at the end of the day, that's like, it's just a vital part of what we do.
No, I think there's a lot of truth in what you said, because ultimately, we compare each other to ourselves, and we constantly look at what everybody else is doing. Why aren't we doing the same things? So I think it's generally about just showing love to yourself, but also be kind to yourself. Don't realize that your journey is uniquely yours.
Totally.
Now, with Film.Dance, which was obviously a gargantuan project with an incredible team, what does the future hold for Jonas, the dance company, Jacob Jonas Dance Company? Would you consider doing something even larger and bigger than Film.Dance in future?
Yeah, I think any project, I love to say that we are project based for a lot of reasons, but for the main reason is that we never want to do something that's formulaic. We never want to do something where we know how to do it over and over and over again. We always want to try to do things new. For Films.Dance specifically, we're already pursuing another 25 films, which will kind of total 35 films, and then total 40 films. And then beyond that, like, we want to just keep making films and cultivating relationships with more artists, having more work be seen, and building our platform. So that's definitely a goal. But beyond that, I think myself personally, as an artist, as an author of work, like, I want to continue to practice expressing choreography, dance, storytelling through different mediums, be it for the live stage, for the camera, if it's a feature-length film, if it's more short films, and also try to find ways to intersect what we're doing with more brands, musicians, advertising agencies, and find ways to popularize the art form in new ways. So a lot of that is just project based, and thinking about time and space and how to execute those things at larger scales each time, so that we can just continue to grow.
Jacob, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. And it's great to hear your thoughts about what's going to happen in your own sphere, also what will happen in dance, hopefully in America.
Thank you so much, and super grateful for the opportunity, for you to give us the opportunity to tell our story. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and take care now.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.